What's up, everybody? It's Ulysses Owens Jr. I'm so happy to be with you again today on Wednesday with this show, my show that I'm excited to have with Open Studio, which is simply called From the Drummer's Perspective, where we explore conversations with incredible drummers. And I'm really, really thrilled about today. I'm letting you know I'm in Florida, and so if you hear a little bit of rain, it's because we're in the middle of a tropical storm, Elsa, but I think we've managed to let Elsa not interrupt our vibe. So I hope everybody is cool and safe out there in the world. I'm also excited with Open Studio to have a lot of great courses with them, so make sure you check that out. I want you to know also about the guest that we have today. He is someone that I've been a fan for many years. I've been in New York for about almost 20 years, and I remember probably within the first maybe 7 or 8 years seeing this incredible drummer. I would see him at Smalls. Also, he's a Yamaha drum endorsee, and I remember seeing pictures of him, and he was always like so intense. Like I was like, who is this guy? Is like, you know. And man, it's deep because all the pictures I would see of him and all the video footage, like he had this very interesting intensity. But then when you hear him play, it's so melodic and it's so like incredible and like so I was like wow, like, and so then I became really amazed and kind of fascinated with even how he held the sticks. And I have to say, in the last few years, when I think about drummers that are really moving forward this music, the canon of being an incredible jazz drummer, being definitely tracing his playing back to the great masters, and also being a master in his own right, I absolutely have to credit him, man. He's just incredible, and I think he is someone that his concept of time, his concept of also entrepreneurially, how he puts a band together. He's always on tour, this guy, So I really am excited about exploring that with him, and also for all of you all. So please put your questions in the comment section. But I want to waste no more time, and please welcome the incredible, the artistic, Mr. Ari HOENIG. What's up, brother?
You surprised me there for a second. I didn't realize that it was coming on me, and then I was like, oh, I should start, you know, picking my teeth or whatever.
That's
Um,
how I feel before I start every show.
can we copy paste that introduction, please, and just play it for the whole hour? I could listen to that a lot of times. I appreciate that a lot. That
It's
means a lot.
true.
Really, really does. Thank you. You know, you know, um, coming from you, it's quite heartfelt. So yeah, much appreciated.
Cool, man. Well, I mean every word of it, man. I want to jump right in, and obviously I've been doing my research on you, your background in Philadelphia, and which I found, which was very interesting. Your dad's a conductor, classical singer. Your mom, violinist and pianist. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the house you grew up in, and whether you heard jazz or just any of that you want to share with us?
Um, I grew up. Yeah, I grew up with classical music. That was just kind of in the general, playing a lot, and jazz I was exposed to a little bit later, but I didn't actually like it at all at first. I
Wow.
mean, the first few times I heard jazz, I was like, it just sounds random, like random notes. And I remember saying that at some point. But yeah, I mean, as I think right around 14, around that age, 13, 14. I mean, actually, I started to really starting to play jazz probably around 12, and and then actually starting to really appreciate it, more like 14, 15, when I started, actually buying records and, that whole thing. But yeah, so that was pretty much it. I started on, violin, I started on piano, and then, in my old age, I'm regressing to the instruments that I first started with.
That's cool, man. I also thought it was really interesting reading more about you that, you got to drums later, like around 12 or 13 when whereas when I watch you play, you have such a natural connection to the instrument. So like what, cuz you have a lot of drummers who like I started really young. So like what was it that gave you that real organic kind of natural connection, to the
I
instrument?
mean, I guess my perspective is that I don't think I have a really natural connection to the drums. I do think I have a natural connection to rhythm.
Ah,
And so in that way, I do feel like I can connect, um, either on different instruments or on singing or whatever, it
mhm.
may be. So I do feel very natural with that. With the drums itself, I mean, I had to work and practice and,
Mm-hmm.
like figure out stuff that we all have to figure out to be
Mm-hmm.
able to play the drums technique and,
Mm-hmm.
all that kind of stuff. So it didn't really feel that, natural, like,
Okay.
oh yeah, this is my home, this is where I've been, you know.
Interesting. So then does that mean that you had like a classical upbringing, like from like did you study classical snare drum, or like did you start with drum set studies first? Like what was that journey like for you?
Um, did I study classical? You mean classical first? I'm sorry.
Like yeah, sorry, I meant like as a drummer, did you study like the classical snare drum, like like so
I
when you did
see.
start, like was it like here's sticks and like an
I
Alfred Basic method book, or was it like sit down and learn a rock groove? Like so
I see.
what what
Yeah,
was
I did both of those things.
okay, cool.
Yeah, I definitely did some classical studies, but
Okay.
mostly it's by ear. I mean, I really learned to play by ear, and
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where, I mean, even though my parents are classical musicians, I think they recognize that thing. Doing it by ear is really the way to go. So,
Okay.
even though that's not how they learned,
Okay.
'cause that's not really not how classical music is taught generally.
Right. Right.
Maybe more now today. I'm not sure about that, but I think it gave me a little chance of my own to rebel against that.
Yeah.
Say, is reading music really that necessary and that important? I mean, and I'm saying that I can say that because I can read music, but I
Mm-hmm.
also recognize that maybe that's not necessarily the way to you know the way to be present with the music.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then in terms of just like being in Philadelphia, like how much did that contribute for you? Like to your understanding and like learning the kid and like like walking past some clubs or like can you talk a little bit about that back then?
There was a good scene. I mean, I was able to find people my own age to play with. I think that was the most important thing. I
Mm-hmm.
was also able to find live music
Mm-hmm.
and great musicians that I could listen to and learn from.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, it was really strong. There was some programs where I was able to take advantage of some programs for kids to
Okay.
so that I could really learn about jazz, some scholarship programs,
Okay.
a few things going on like that. Not a lot of them, but enough that I could really take advantage of some of the I guess the school system had like all city band, and they
Yeah.
had good directors, and mostly it was my peers and the people that I played with, and
Mm-hmm.
just people that I, could talk to be excited about music, or who were excited about music, who
Mm-hmm.
helped get me excited about,
Right. Right. Right.
how it is. It's like when you get around people who are excited about, oh, check this out,
Right.
inspires you. So I was able, I was lucky enough to be around that,
Mm-hmm.
a good amount of time.
So man, so who was like the cat like for me like it was Philly Joe Jones. Like when I heard Philly Joe on Milestones, I was like I'm gonna be a jazz drummer. Like that was a thing for me. Like who was that guy? Because like you have such a purpose when you play. Like who was that guy or person that when you heard them, it was like this is the direction I'm going in.
I did have an influence like that, but it wasn't somebody who I heard at the beginning that made me want to become a jazz drummer. I mean, I would say actually Tane was probably
Hmm.
from my like younger, probably 16, when I was 16 or 17, when I heard him, that was as close as I could get towards, oh, I want to become a jazz drummer like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And his playing on like in Wynton's quintet.
Yeah.
Um, but then I was introduced to another musician you probably don't know, but I got to see live a lot, and I already knew that I wanted to play drums, and I
Mm-hmm.
knew I wanted to play jazz. But when I heard this person, it really focused, I think, a lot of my creativity in a
Mm-hmm.
way, and
Mm-hmm.
it made me, I guess, it also what I wanted to create emotionally. It gave
Mm-hmm.
me a lot of direction. His name is Earl Harvin, and he's somebody
Wow, I never
I
heard of him.
heard when I was going to school. He wasn't in school at the same time as I was, but he was in the Dallas area
Mm-hmm.
at the time. he played. I mostly heard him play jazz, but he also played a lot of other different kinds of music
Mm-hmm.
as well. It's very versatile and really a genius musician for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that he played jazz specifically, I really connected with because it had that whole melodic. It was just very, very melodic, and you could tell that the song was always just first and foremost. He was
Mm-hmm.
playing the song, and that's always the thing that gets me about especially playing tunes and especially about jazz specifically is that it's the song. It's about the song, and
Mm-hmm.
connecting to the song. And I love improvising around the song. But as long as you're connected, sometimes you could be holding on by a thread.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if you hear it, it's all very valid and very cool. So yeah, so Earl Harvin he probably was the one that shaped that the most, I would say.
No, I love that. And speaking of you brought up Dallas. Like, can you talk a little bit about that transition of going to UNT, which is really obviously this like, big band? Because when I saw that, I was like, man, I didn't realize this cat went to UNT. Because like to me, like I look at you as you're so modern and like you're playing it so open, and I feel like players that come out of that school specifically have like a very kind of direct approach. And so to hear that you went there, but then that you like also eventually transferred to William P. Like, can you talk a little bit about that experience of like going there, auditioning, whatever, and then like studying with Ed Soph, and then like kind of coming back to New York, like in any part of that you wanna.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like anything else, right? It's hopefully your individuality is the thing that comes through, right? So,
Right.
I mean, you can do whatever study. I mean, I studied with. I've had lessons with a lot of people, but
Mm-hmm.
for every single teacher that I had, there were certain things that I could take from them, and there were certain things that I didn't want to take from them. I had to make a
Yeah.
choice. And I
Right.
hope my students are the same way. Because they don't want to. I don't want them to take everything from me. I want
Right.
them to
Right.
disagree with some things and be like, okay, that's
Right.
fine. I disagree with that, but I agree with this, and this is what
Right.
I'm going to get out of my lessons with Ari. That's what it should be.
Right.
So I think in a way we're all self-taught.
Mm-hmm.
We all make choices about how we want to play and what we like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then in another sense, nobody's self-taught because we all have teachers and influences, and we all listen to. I mean, at least anybody that's listened to music at all, like
Right.
I think it would be hard to say to say that you have listened to any music. But anyway, yeah, I think in that sense. So North Texas, William Patterson, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's about the people that like the peers that I met there, the other students, the ones that hit me to, hey, check this record out, hey, check out this player, hey, listen to oh, cool, like what's that? Oh, right, and
Mm-hmm.
and those are the people that that I just credit with my own growth, as
Mm-hmm.
well as whatever just me, whatever I decided to like or didn't like. That's what I wanted to practice. So I wanted. One day I realized, oh, I want to learn to play tunes on the drums.
Yeah.
Let me do that. I'm gonna have to give it a little bit of thought and effort. So let me just see if I can do that.
Yeah.
Or I wanna learn how this rhythm sounds. I have an idea of what it is like conceptually, but I don't understand intuitively. This what it is. How can I teach myself that where I haven't heard anybody play it yet? It's only an idea. It's like a creative idea that's essentially like an intellectual idea. It's being
Mm-hmm.
formed from that direction. So can I develop that and make it a part of my language? Let's see if I
Right.
can do that. So I don't know. I think that probably that happens to you get influenced by schools, but at the end of the day, you're Ulysses Owens, and that's who you are. And then
Yeah.
school is going to change that. Really.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you said that because I feel like a lot of people that watch, my show or tune into the series, I get a lot of questions from students who are either, figuring out do they want to go to school or they're at school and many times they're kind of blaming the school for either their success or their failures. And so I'm really glad to hear you talk a lot about like, yes, you've gone to UNT, yes, you went to William Patterson, but it ultimately boils down to who you are. Because even for me, like going to Juilliard, I had a lot of great access to great drummers, but what I've been fortunate to accomplish has more to do with my own willpower. So I'm glad that's something you mentioned
Sure.
as well. You also talked about the solo drum stuff, which for me, Ari, first of all, I love hearing you play, but that is like probably the most fascinating thing to me about you is like how when I hear you play a composition, like it really actually like you can really hear the tune. So can you tell me like what was the first moment you sat in your shed, you know whether it was Donnelly or whatever, and you actually started figuring out like whether it's bending pitches or really sounding like playing a tune versus some of us who we just play a bop head on the snare drum and then we just start blowing. like
Right.
how did that start for you?
Well, it was confirmation was the
See?
for me. And it was the same thing. Like I learned it. I just wanted to get the general phrasing of it, the feel, and so I was, learning it on the snare, and then at some point I was thinking, you know what, I think I might be able to play at least the contour of the melody on the drums, which is a closer. It's kind of taking the listener and grabbing them a little bit more, saying, "Hey, look, here's the contour of the melody as well as the phrasing," and that's what I wanted to do. So I learned that. That was the first tune that I learned, and I had also been, this is also that after I listened, I heard Earl, and also Jeff Hamilton was doing some similar type of things, and so I really liked. I mean, my favorite thing, it's like, I just blew me away, man, when a drummer is in the middle of like a, really, really intense interaction, whatever, solo, guitar, piano, whatever, trumpet, anything, right? And then it's time for a drum solo, and they're just like, I'm not going to compete on an intensity level here. Let me bring it back. Let me just play the song for a second. And that really always strikes me as being just a really able to access a lot of depth. And so that's that's kind of what I wanted to. In order to do that, I had to learn to play the songs. So that's why I learned to play the song.
No, I love that. So as we move further on, like for the drummers that are sitting at home and saying, how do I learn how to solo better or play a tune? Your advice is maybe start on the snare drum first.
I mean, learn the song first. So,
Right.
The very first thing is you gotta know the song. You gotta be able to sing it, so you listen to it. My general advice is listen to a couple versions of the song, at least 2-3 versions, know the form of the song, and be able to sing the melody, yourself. And that's really step number one. If it means you take a lot of showers and you have to go in there, then you take a lot of showers and you just learn to sing the melody over and over again. There shouldn't be any doubt. I think a lot of drummers have this like misconception that when somebody else is playing the melody and they're playing like ding, ding, a ding, ding, a ding, that they know the song.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
Oh, Bye Bye Blackbird. Do you know Bye Bye Blackbird? Yeah, I know it. Oh, great. Well, how does it go? It goes ding, chicka, ding, chicka, ding.
Right. Right.
So learning the song is the very first thing, and I don't take anything from because you teach too, and it's like as soon as you want to start somebody somewhere, and then you realize, wait a minute,
Yeah.
like
Right.
we gotta go back a little bit, or not. I mean, it depends on them, obviously, but that's knowing the song would be first, and then to be able to play it on the snare drum is it's a way that you can start to access the phrasing, right? Because like so if you're playing confirmation, right? So Bird is obviously his phrasing is this, is his identity, so very much a part of his identity, right? So you want to be able to listen to it and play it and listen to the same way that you learn language. That you learn a language, if you're trying to speak a language, you have to listen to it and then try to say it. A baby would learn that way. When I had kids, the most interesting thing that I learned from them was how they learned, their learning process, how the brain makes somebody learn. And that's it. So they'll just be laying in the crib, like trying to say the words that they heard in their head. Right. But they don't know how. They don't have the technique yet. So they keep practicing, keep trying, practicing. And then they learn to say the words, but they don't know what they mean still. And then they gradually know what they mean. Right. So like the idea is that if you want to take it from the tradition, that it's about listening and then playing. And so the amazing thing, what we have is we have this technology, we have recordings of, and we can listen to recordings of people who are no longer with us. we have the ability to do that. We can access this tradition on record. So much information, we can
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I think most people take that for granted. I certainly take that for granted, but
Right.
there was a point where people couldn't do that. They'd have to just go out and listen to whoever was in their town, and play. But we have these records and we can access all of this stuff. Anyway.
Oh, I love it, man. I love it. I'm gonna also pick your brain before we get into all the career stuff. I'm gonna pull up a drumstick, and you got this thing with your grip, man. What is up with like can you explain that? You got this. Let me get it in the camera. Okay, here we go. You kind of it's very and you use kind of the arm. Like, can you talk a little bit about your technique approach with the stick, also as well with with your touch, because it reminds me a little bit even like Brian Blade, where when I first went and saw him play, it was like he was getting sound out of the drum as opposed to like hitting. So can you talk a little bit about your touch and your approach, and also like you kind of it's like in here. So yeah, maybe in any of that you want to share with us.
Yeah, definitely. So it's funny that you mentioned Blade, but I mean, talking about touch, I feel like for me, being able to listen to him, but also watch him play, it was quite, like life changing, I would say, in the way that I wanted to, I'm trying to figure out how to say that. To balance the sound, I guess, to match the sounds that I was hearing, the master of touch. But what does that mean? And it means like dynamics. It means, I guess, a whole lot of things, right? But I think at the end of the day, like you're talking about technique and how I hold the sticks, and I would feel maybe not super comfortable telling everybody how I hold the sticks, because I actually think that it's not a good way to do it.
Really?
Yeah. So what I would do is I would listen. So for example, if I'm listening to Blade, right, and I'm listening to his sound, and I would try to play that, the same thing you're talking about, right? Yeah. And so I did, and another person's like, for instance, like Papa Joe Jones, I'm sure, checked out a lot. And so just trying to get Papa Joe Jones, getting that sound, the brush sound, or whatever, know. And the way that I was able to get, I don't want to say that I got that sound, but I was able to, get as close that I'm capable of to get to that specific thing, was a different technique. But the problem is that I wouldn't want to share it because I don't think it's a good technique. I mean, I don't think that it's a very healthy, it's tight, first of all. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't think playing with it's very controlled, which is why I use wrist and why I use some arm. And I'm better at it, but it's something that I'm actually trying to get out of. I'm trying.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've been somewhat successful just physically. I've had a couple shoulder surgeries in the last few years. And so I need to change, the way that I'm playing, which I have been working on for a while. And like I said, I have been somewhat successful, but the last thing I would want to do is teach a student to play the technique that I used to play.
But even that is really hit, Ari, like that you're able to acknowledge that for yourself of like, hey, here's something I did to kind of get the result I wanted. But as I move forward, like you're improving, because I love that idea of how you talked about you heard a sound and you just tried to get that sound, because I tell my students that all the time. Like I was talking to someone earlier today and we were talking about like Billy Higgins, and I would do the same thing. I would hear, Eastern Rebellion or whatever, and I'm like, I want that sound or whatever, same with Louis Hayes. Like, and I didn't worry so much about the technique. So it's interesting to hear that was your journey as well, but now you're kind of trying to work backwards a little bit.
Well, yeah, or just be more mindful physically, I guess. Okay. And that's what I do with my students too, because I think, what you said is that's the way that I want to teach and that's the way that I want to learn. Right. But at the same time, I want me and also for my students to be mindful of their physicality, mindful of their bodies, so that if they do feel tightness or if they do feel pain or something like that, wait a minute, can I figure a better way that I can do this so they don't fall into these habits that are hurtful to them long term?
Right, right, right. No, that's key. And I think, and it's always a hard thing, I think, as a drummer, because so much of what we do is so physical, but then it's obviously spiritual too, right? So there's that divide of I want to get where I need to get to spiritually to make the music I need to make, but also there is that physical side that we have to be aware of.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, kind of shifting to your career, you know, people that you played with, Kenny Werner, Chris Potter, John Michelle Pilk, Lavano, Herbie. The list goes on and on and on and on. What do you think are three? I know you're a very humble guy, but like, what do you think are 2 to 3 things that gave you or gives you the ability to play with these people? Because I know obviously you do a lot of focus on your own, like playing with your own band now. But what do you think were things that you worked on characteristically that made you that guy that a lot of people want to work with, particularly these incredible artists, Pat Metheny, or excuse me, Pat Martino, Dave Holland, all, the list goes on and on.
So I guess, the way that I would answer that is just say that I think that the quality that I have in my playing that would be attractive to people, not necessarily anyone in particular, but I would just say someone that can play, is the quality that I have to understand what other people are doing. So I'm a good listener. I understand when I go to hear music, I understand what's going on. Somebody taking a solo, I understand what they're doing. I understand you when you play. I'm like, yep, I relate. I can relate to the music that I'm hearing, and to drummers, but also to non-drummers, like to whatever instrument might be playing. So I think that's the attraction. That's probably the main thing that gets me, that I don't want to say keeps me employed, because that would be like, it's like, man, what happened to all your gigs? Oh man, I did this with Owens, man. I went on the show and I was like, yeah, man, this is all the stuff that keeps me employed.
Yeah, right.
I don't have any. Where are my gigs? I don't want to say that, but
Yeah.
but I would say that I don't, being able to play the drums is not the thing that would that somebody would want to play with me because of that. I think that it's more because I learn songs fast. I'm a good listener. I'm able to to complement the music,
Mm-hmm.
effectively because I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think for me, like every time I've heard you play, and even like getting ready for this series or this interview, I was listening to a lot of your music, and it was really fascinating to me how you play the song clearly, but then there's all that in between stuff that you play, right? There's like there's the musicality, and I know that I definitely have to attribute that to why you're working and why you are who you are. Do you want to talk about maybe break down like what is the process of how you learn a tune? So like if I hand you like Giant Steps in 7, because I know you're like a metric modulation guy. I hand you Giant Steps in 7 or Kenny Werner tune, that hard ass music. Like how does Ari Hoenig learn a tune? Like, do you sit down at the piano? Do you listen to it over and over again? Like what is your process?
Um, so I think I would probably. I mean, you start with if it's available to be listened to, right? Then yeah, that would be the most kind of direct way to do it. I would listen to it, and I would listen to it enough times. If there was a chart, if depending on how the complexity of the song, where that could help me through, I might use that. It depends. I mean, I always prefer to learn things without a chart, um, but time, how it is. Like you
Same.
may not have time to do that. I
Yeah.
could go through a tune 4 times to do it. Otherwise I could, basically listen to the head and read it and be like,
Right.
that's the tune. I
Right.
understand it, but I wouldn't have understood it if I just listened to it. I was like, well, where's one? I'm not even
Yeah.
sure. Let me
Yeah.
go back and listen to it, and then I could figure it out. But it might
Mm-hmm.
take a little while, depending on obviously the complexity. Um, yeah, so I think that's probably I actually have a video on YouTube. It's called How to Learn Songs. I say it's called
Oh, nice.
How to Work with Songs. Is actually what it's called, um, and just it's just kind of exploring that exact topic. So
Yeah.
it's
I'm.
part of my Patreon thing and the
Yeah.
whole education thing that I do. So
Yeah.
I put some of the videos up, and that's one of them.
Yeah, and you know it's funny because I have a whole part of our discussion. We'll go into it, I guess, now that I wanted to talk to you about, especially about like in terms of entrepreneurially. Like I've also looked up to you, man. Like I've been watching you for the last few years and just how you're making certain moves, and even like with the Patreon thing, even like the education thing. You have several books out as well. Like so, how did you go from clearly you're a guy that's about the music, you're about the drums, to okay, now I want to educate, and now you're creating all these materials, and you have this really cool way of how you engage with your audience. So like, was that a methodical thing, or was it just more of you as you grew, as your audience grew, you then wanted to create ways to relate to them and give them information?
Um, I mean, I always enjoyed teaching, so it's something that I've done more in the last 10 years than previously. But I first of all, I like it, and I like so the educational materials that I've put out they started, I guess, in my, I don't know, mid 20s or whenever I first started putting them out. They went from excruciatingly difficult to a little bit easier and a little bit easier,
Yeah.
a lot easier. And so, so now I'm putting out, because what I'm learning is, what also is best for, I guess, most people and the way that they can learn. Because a lot of people, like, they would want to get better, for example, with rhythm. So they got these metric modulation books that I made for Mel Bay, and
Yeah.
that I was working on, in my 20s, and they're just too hard. Like
Yeah.
it's more than anything. They're poor. I just wanted to kind of document some of the things that I was doing with Johannes, and so you know I was able to make them into a couple books, which is nice, but it's not really. I would always recommend that people go through my rhythm training videos
Mm.
first, to understand the language and how it works, and then start to understand like how these, because there's not really a metric people love this word like metric
Yeah.
modulation, but it's not. It's not
Yeah.
really metric modulation. It's if anything, it's just a rhythm. It's just like implied rhythms,
Yeah. Yeah.
that can make give you illusions. So anyway, yeah, they went from very difficult to much easier, and now, I know how to start from whatever the student's level. This is where you start from. This is where you start from. This is how you can get to that place.
So, man, can you give me like, especially for our audience, for some that have never been introduced to this concept of, though you hate the word modulation, like in your rhythmic training, can you maybe just give us like, a 60-second lesson and what is that to the person who's like, what do you mean? Like, what is
Oh
that?
yeah, absolutely.
And your concept, your approach,
Sure, right. So basically, the way that I approach everything, how, it's like in, for example, Cuban music. You say, okay, there's a clave, right? You have a clave, right, and that means key. What is a clave actually? Well, it's just an underlying rhythm that's going on behind the song, right? So in jazz, that is the melody. The melody is essentially the clave. So what first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna sing the melody. That's why you have to know the song. Is you're gonna sing the melody. So it's like, for example, pick a song, right? What's a song that you like, for
let's
example?
do Billy's Bounce.
Okay, so Billy's Bounce. So then I would sing Billy's Bounce, right? And then clap a rhythm. I'm not gonna, like, at the very beginning stages, you have to figure out where the subdivisions lie for Billy's Bounce for the the student. So they need to understand that, oh, everything's triplets. 2, 3. Do 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 do, do 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 do, or even do 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 do, right? So really slowly you'd be able to do it like that.
Yeah.
And, eventually you're going to start to add different accents with the triplets. Eventually you can do triplets grouped in 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6,
Yeah.
7, and you can access some rhythms that are much more progressive in that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're starting with even just like the most basic 3/2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and just being able to hear that rhythm with the melody. Boo doo 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 do 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 and then
Yeah, Ari.
going to, I don't know, groupings of 5 triplets. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2.
Ooh.
Right, so just another vocabulary, another piece of language. You could do, anything in between. Groupings of 11.
Ooh.
Whatever it is. So that's the way that I'm, that I like to at least start this a student being able to think about, how rhythm works and being able to hear how you can create over a song and still really hear the melody.
So Ari, why? I'm gonna play devil's advocate for a second. And this is not the guy that's a fan of you and what you do. Like, why is this important? Like to the person who's like, whether they're a singer or instrumentals, and like, all I want my drummers to do is just play some time. Like, why
Yeah.
is the subdivision and all of this, ability to hear different aspects of the time and groupings? Why is that important to a drummer or a musician that is learning music?
Yeah, definitely. Great question. So, I mean, it's actually not about a drummer learning to play those things. It's about them being able to hear them. So,
Wow.
it's ear training, right? Rhythmic ear training. The value of it, and you know this more than anyone, your value, is if you understand rhythmically what the soloist is doing, you're going to be able to lock your time. And if you're playing quarter notes, you're going to be able to lock your time in. What if the, you got a trumpet player and that's playing, a rhythm like that, or they're playing groupings of, 5 triplets or something like that, right? If you can just lay it right in there and you hear where they're at, then you got them, you can catch them. You have that connection. If not, then you're playing and essentially shutting them out and they have to listen and lock with you, which is kind of like shaking someone's hand. That's kind of like flopping their, they're trying to, it's like, they're hearing you, but you're not understanding them. So this is not about musical choice. This is about learning to understand what you hear, just understanding the language, and then from there you can make whatever musical choice you whoever you are. But this will work. So it's just, if you just want to play quarter notes, this is perfect for you bass players. Just being able to walk quarter notes. So many bass players will just walk and they won't, they'll shut other stuff out. And there may be a musical, reason that they might decide that they want to do that. And I'm not going to philosophize about it, but the value of any musician that understands, that has empathy for the musicians that they're playing with, because we're a group, right? We're a team, a band is a team. And whether you decide to, go with someone or not, that's your decision. But to have the ability to do that, that's just a better educated musician.
Man, that I want to get like a quote, Rachel. Like, y'all just take that clip, because I can't tell, and this, how many jazz camps I've taught at, or rhythm section workshop classes, where the idea of time becomes this like argument. You know what I mean? And to your point, having the ability to understand time gives you the ability to play with people. And it reminds me of a story that Wynton told me many years ago. He said how Billy Higgins took him aside and basically told him, like, with that ride cymbal, it's your job to match, or Billy's job to match where each horn player is. Like, it's his job to find their beat. He said everybody has a beat. He said, and if you can, like, his job is to find exactly where they are and play with them in that spot. And so what you're talking about and understanding all these different groupings is really, really understanding kind of the circle of rhythm and of life. So that's very profound. I love how you broke it down.
No, I like how you involved life too. That's even more profound.
I mean, yeah, right. But think about it, right? Because we all, like you and I, like, we're both drummers and we feel life differently and we have different experiences, but we have an ability to play with a lot of different people because we're not just married to our own experiences,
Right. And we can understand, what other people are doing and just relate, to them, right?
Exactly. So I know you said you wrote these hard books when you were younger, but can you just give us, the titles of the various books that you've written out there so our audience can know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the first thing is I could give you the titles of the very hard books, but I'm going to opt to, you can find those yourself. What I would recommend is my videos called Rhythm Training. The series is on my music masterclass, which I put out a bunch of things in video form. I have a book called Systems, which is basically it's kind of taking what we all did with Ted Reed book, with the what Dawson was dealing with, and I don't know who came up with that stuff originally. It goes way back, obviously, but it's just kind of my approach with that, taking that as far as that I could creatively, and that's called Systems. So that's an actual book, and then my Patreon, the videos on that are on Patreon, which is at this point it's probably like over 100 and I don't know 10 to 15 videos, but they're all just kind of educationally what I'm thinking about. It's not always drums. It's a lot of drum type of things, but it's also just a lot of just kind of musically based things. So those are the kind of educational things that I'd recommend, pointing people in that direction. And obviously the stuff is on my website, education, just like yours, has education stuff, and you can look it up if you have a specific kind of idea of where you want to go. But my main recommendation is to start with rhythm training, start with these videos on my music masterclass, because I feel like that's the window into everything else. That's the way that things work. And some of you are going to already know that, and that's great. A lot of you are not, and a lot of you will think that you don't need it, and you do. So that's that. And when I'm saying whoever's listening, that's my experience, working with students about that.
No, I love it, man, and I appreciate you for sharing that. It's funny you talked about how not so much the older you get, but the more experienced you get, a lot of what you teach becomes more simplified. And I agree, because like I'm actually getting ready to film a new course next week with Open Studio, or actually, tomorrow with Open Studio. Cool. But it's called Back to Basics, and it's really same of what you're talking about is really stripping everything down, because my first course I did with them, Finding Your Beat, got very intricate, and I find that especially as we look at today's jazz drummer, I find that, and I would love to get your opinion on this, I feel like we're getting further and further away from like what and where to begin, or like how to begin and where to begin from. And so I'm finding that, and I don't know if you've had this experience, but I feel like a lot of the teaching I've been doing recently, I feel like I'm teaching everybody the same thing, because everybody kind of like is missing all the same stuff, versus I remember there was a time where, drummer one would come in and I need to just talk to them about ride cymbal, and maybe drummer two would come in and I talk to them about, independence. But now I'm finding everybody like doesn't know anything about the ride cymbal, so I'm finding the idea of really going back to basics and kind of saying this is sort of the starting point is something that I'm realizing has been necessary. But I'd love to know, like, what do you think about that concept? Like, do you feel the same thing? Do you see, like, what are you seeing in your students today versus maybe a few years ago? Because I know you teach a ton.
Yeah. I'm honestly, like, I have, in my students in general, I have a lot of respect for. I actually think they're excellent. Okay. But you never know, right? So right. Everybody's coming from a different place. But I would say that some of the kind of problems that I face with students, and when and again, this is not with the majority, but I do notice that somehow it's students that have learned an instrument, and I teach a lot of non-drummers.
Oh, cool! I didn't know that. Okay.
Probably half of my students are probably even slightly more are
wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so, but the drummers are, guilty of this as well, is that, when they learn the instrument, they're kind of put in front of this instrument and they're taught technique. But the problem is they're not ever really played the music. And they're not able to really ingest the music and listen to the music. So they end up learning technique exercises without, listening to Kind of Blue, or, listening to, Goldberg variations, or just the basic great music that exists out there, and so then I think that's the main thing that can really hamper any kind of progress, because that's what the difference is that when I'm teaching somebody like that, the progress is about 1/10 the speed as somebody that has listened to music as
Right, right.
young age, and doesn't have to do with the instrument. It just has to do with internalizing the music and listening to the music a bunch of times when you're a kid.
Right, right.
Just like you do with language. So that's actually the main thing. So I think, parents out there that want to teach their kids instrument, that's not the way to go. Let them listen to music.
Yes.
Play them great music and play it again and again and again. You want your kid to play, to be able to play a good groove. Don't give them a drum set.
Yes.
Give them some James Brown and
Yes.
have them listen to that, for a
Yeah.
while. They don't need to play. They
Yep.
just need to hear it for a while. And that's going to be there with them. And then whenever they get to a drum set, they're going to have an idea what to do.
Man, I'm so glad you said that, Ari, because I feel like that is the other thing that's been missing is so many musicians I've met, they're trying to approach the music without embracing the music. To your
Right.
point, like they're like, how do I get better at swing? And I'm like, well, what's the last swing record you checked out?
Yeah.
Or how do I get, or saying, how do I get better at, being able to play odd time? Well, how many records have you, So it's almost like they're thinking by osmosis that, or a sheer desire, they're going to get better at something. So this is really, really key.
Or you could just say, buy Ari Hoenig's video of mastering.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh,
that's
right.
That's going to be the next answer. All right, Ari, I wanted to shift and kind of ask you about your business side, man. I have to tell you, there have been times where I get your newsletter, and especially pre-COVID, and I'm like, how the hell is this dude touring like as a band leader this much? Like, I mean, it's so fascinating, and I'm so happy for you. So I'd love to know, like, when did you make that decision to be a band leader, especially because, as a drummer, I feel like a lot of promoters are sometimes their ability to want to trust a drummer-led band is not as quick as maybe another instrument-led band. So can you talk about sort of when you knew you wanted to be a band leader, and then a little bit of, your entrepreneurial side? How did you start creating that continuity of booking your band? And obviously I know there's relationships and all that, right? But again, just telling us a little bit about your process in that area.
Yeah. It's funny because I don't feel like I'm really doing it much, but I guess I have, over the years, I definitely have, I mean, I have toured with a band substantially. I don't know, what to say. I don't feel like I'm very, aggressive with trying to, book things or anything like that. I generally will wait till something comes to me and falls in my lap. And if that happens, if I'm lucky enough to get an anchor like that, then I'll put out feelers about other things, in the area, that type of thing. I did a fun segment Patreon video, which is something like that. It's like I think it's called "How to Book a Tour" or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of fun in that way. But a lot of it is just general common sense. But I think at the end of the day, it's about the music and just getting good people to play with me and trying to do a lot of dates with the same band, with the same lineup. Okay. Either something that's under my name or could be under anybody else's name, but getting a project so that it's like an actual group that plays together instead of I'm going to make a project and put together a band and make a record and then that's it.
Right.
So that to me is not really appealing. If I'm going to make a record, like that band is going to play. This is a difficult just now because I haven't been able to really have where I'm going to the studio to do a record on Sunday, but
nice.
And I have a group that I'm really happy with, and we have actually played together but just because I've started playing locally, like local places that I can walk to in 10 minutes,
Right.
and outside and little gigs just to really get the band so that it's, just that it really sounds good. And that's kind of how I'm managing that. So I guess I try to just, play and enjoy the music making process. And then, if the other stuff comes, amazing, but I'm not expecting that,
Yeah. So then I'm going to get a little bit more micro. So three tips. How do you book a tour?
Great. don't ask Ari Hoenig for
No,
that.
go to his Patreon page.
Venmo, Ari,
Venmo,
Ari.
email and pay $200. I'm just playing.
No, I mean, the only thing I could say is just again common sense, right? So, where's a place that you can play? Is there anywhere that you've been to or that you've played at where they might like you enough to have you back and maybe bring a band?
Right.
That's the main thing, right? And then so, yeah, I mean, things. It's hard, man. I mean, that's I mean, right now it's not, I don't think that it's something that but if you're lucky and you're successful, but I don't really have the I don't feel like I have, I'm able to advise anybody on how to be successful. I do feel like I can give, advice on certain things. That's not really something that I feel like on the other side of that most of the time.
So what about on the other end of that? How do you put together a band? Because I will say again, as I've watched you, I feel like you have been really great at surrounding yourself. Especially the video I actually posted on my Instagram page where you were like blowing over, over this tune, and your band was so and synced with you. Like, so what do you think about when you put together a band? Who's in your band right now currently? Who you're going to be recording with on Sunday?
Oh yeah, my trio, Gotti Lahavi is on piano and Ben Tiberio is on bass. So the cool thing is that when I guess first, it's just like a general connection to what they play, and I feel that that sounds great. Maybe a uniqueness about them. Obviously, the feel, the groove. Are they swinging? Do they have a good pulse, a good feel? Can I lock with that? That's the main thing. If that's a yes, then the other things can kind of fall into place. If they hear what I'm playing, that could be a yes or a no, but they can learn to do that. So all the bands that I played with have not all understood every single thing that I'm playing. Maybe that they will a little bit later after we play for a year or two or whatever it is together, but not necessarily right off the bat. So that's why I like to have a one group to really do a lot of gigs with, maybe even just try to play without there being a gig. That's what I had to do with COVID, right? Because it's like, hey, do you want to just come over and play? Because we can't really play out, but we can work on some music or something.
No, I love that. Love that, man. What would you say, Ari, as we kind of get on the other side of with not having as much time left, but like, what would you say is the best piece of musical advice that you've received? The thing, like earlier when you talked about Earl Harvin and kind of how he helped you with his concept, or at least you watching him. Same with Blade. What has been that kind of thing that maybe that advice that's been kind of that compass for you, or sort of a North Star in your life or career or your music, or
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, maybe I answered this in different ways, but I would just say learn a lot of songs. That's just a good way. You can't really go wrong. And the more songs the more that opens up, your language, your vocabulary, and your knowledge. So just learn a lot of songs.
Oh man, I love that. I love that. What are you excited about? Obviously, you talked about the recording. What else do you want to let us know? That you got going on. I know earlier you showed me your drum room. I'm sure our audience would love to see you, even if it's just drop a stick on the drum, do something. but yeah, what are you excited about? What do you want to let us know that you're getting into now?
Well, so let's see. I mentioned Patreon. I've been working at that quite a bit. That's been really cool, really fun. On the educational tip, I have recently made an effort to play more. During COVID, I actually practiced on a piano, and so I felt kind of ready to go out and do some gigs. So I actually I'm doing a Tuesday night piano trio gig now.
Wow!
At a place called Domain Wine Bar, which is in Long Island City.
Wow!
And I have two really great music. This drummer, Dennis Boulos. I don't know if you know Dennis.
No, I don't know him.
Killing drummer, really, really great. Brazilian, both Brazilian, the bass player Eduardo Belo as well. And so that's the trio that I've been playing with there. It's really fun. Just one of those things that I feel kind of like a kid again, like everything's, when something works, I get really excited, and so that's been really exciting. Also, the trio that I'm recording with is doing also a regular Monday gig at a place called Fifth Hammer, which is also in Long Island City. So these are all right around the corner for me, basically, and all really fun. So those are the kind of the two live things that I recommend for people to take a look at. Nothing is streaming. Those are not streaming. So
yeah, right. That's like the new thing. Like, come check this out, and it's only gonna happen now.
Right, exactly. And so we can retain some element of value to what we do, to not have everything be on YouTube.
Right.
When everything's on YouTube, it loses your value. The value doesn't have any value anymore, right?
Right.
But let me see if I can.
Yeah, man, I would love to hit whatever you want to share, something short, or and to our audience out there, while he's doing that, if anybody has any specific question, I've seen a couple things. Some people are asking, Ari, do you play bass? I think someone was saying, is that how you learned bass? I didn't know you played bass.
I don't play bass.
That's what I thought. So I guess that person, that was not relevant. David Harper says he loves NY Standard, your album.
Thank you.
We got some people. Yura says, play like it matters. I don't know if that's a tune of yours or something.
No, I think it's probably just play like it matters.
Okay.
Every note I put is the last note for me.
Right. The Joyce Glasgow's, which the answer would definitely be yes for me. She asked, does Alexander technique postural work help drummers? I know for me, I learned Alexander technique at Juilliard, and I didn't study it extensively, but the little bit I studied was incredibly insightful. I don't know what about for you, Ari?
Yeah. I study Alexander technique. Yeah.
Okay.
Richie Barchet is my teacher. He's excellent. So
man, Richie.
Yeah.
Oh wow, man! Please give my love to that cat, man. I haven't seen him in a long time.
Yeah. I work with him, on a semi-regular basis, and he really helps me be aware of, things. I mean, it's an uphill battle, and it's definitely nothing's perfect, but it's helped me anyway.
Cool, man. Well, yeah. Take it away, man. Whatever you want to share.
Sorry about the tunings. I'm tuning really low because of
nice.
Specific songs I had to play.
Wow, man. Ari, thank you so much for being here, man. I appreciate you. And
I
man,
appreciate you, Ulysses. Thank you so much for having me. You
thank
really
you,
been
brother.
great.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll be seeing you soon, man. Thank you.
Anytime. Talk
All right,
soon.
man. All right, take care. For those that are still here, I want to thank Ari again. That was what a way to end. Um, and again, check out all the things that he talked about, his Patreon page, and follow him on Instagram and all of that great stuff. I want to let those that are in St. Louis know I'm actually going to be there tomorrow through Saturday. I'll be flying in tomorrow. I have a concert on Friday evening with Peter Martin and Bob DeBoo. There is a cool link that will appear if you want to get tickets to see it live. We are having a live concert. So for those that want to get some tickets, there are tickets still left to that concert to hear us play trio. For those that can't be there physically, we will have an opportunity to stream it. So go to Open Studios website, and I'm sure you'll be able to check that out. Also, thank you in advance for those that have checked out my courses as well that are out there. And I'm excited, man. I get to film this new course that really I designed based on a lot of the teaching I've been doing the last 3 to 5 years, and really wanting to come up with a lesson, or I should say a series of lessons that help us to get back to basics. Like, what are the basic grooves and techniques that can help us to get better at making music and also to gig? Because I find that a lot of students were coming to me and learning things, but the things they were learning on the drums weren't really helping them to create the kind of success that they wanted in their careers as a musician. Because, you know, I always say as a drummer, there's only a few things you need to know to be able to gig. You know, if you can, whether it's swing, if it's having a good ride cymbal beat, if it's playing funk, getting that good groove between the hi-hat, snare, and bass drum. If it's Latin, you know, learning some of the great Latin rhythms or Brazilian rhythms, you know. So that's what this new course is going to be about. But I want to thank Ari HOENIG again. Thank all of you all. Next week, we're going to be here again Wednesday at 5 with the legendary Peter Erskine. So I'm so excited to be able to interview my hero and talk to him as well. Please DM me questions or send in questions to the chat. But I want to thank all of you all again for logging in with me every week. And yeah, thanks so much. God bless. And thanks for tuning in to From the Drummer's Perspective with myself, Ulysses Owens Jr. Take care.